Let's bring in our Margaret Brennan, who joins us now from the White House. And Margaret, we know you've been reporting on this latest development. What more can you tell us?
Well, this is a move that President Trump, when he was a private citizen, employed quite often when it came to information that he found to be disparaging or damaging in some way to him or his businesses, and that is to have his lawyers come up with a legal complaint against the accuser. In this case, as president, the White House is trying to distance themselves from this and outsourcing it to the president's private attorney. What we know from sources familiar with the thinking of the president's attorney is that they are going to try to focus on the allegations made in that it's really more than an allegation, the sworn testimony, I should say, from James Comey yesterday, the former FBI director, in regard to his private conversations with President Trump. The political calculation seems to be to lump James Comey in with the Washington establishment, which President Trump was elected to disrupt. And the allegations made here are that he is a quote-unquote leaker that the president thinks needs to be looked at and perhaps punished for having done so. The question, though, really needs to be put to our legal team and to our Justice Department folks about whether this kind of lawsuit or complaint would really have any legs to it. What we know is that the legal team plans to file early next week a complaint with the Justice Department and also with the Senate committees that James Comey spoke to when he shared information about his private conversations with the president in reference to the notes that he took and he typed, according to his own testimony, on a classified laptop. Of course, James Comey said he did so because he was afraid that the president, he said, might lie about what happened during those conversations, and so he tried to sort of memorialize that in a legal sense, and the president's legal team is questioning whether he could have done that and made it public at all.
Margaret, after James Comey said that the president had spread and the administration had spread lies, plain and simple, you had the White House press secretary, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, answering two questions, which for a lot of reporters who cover the White House like you, must have been very surreal. One, answering to a question that the president is not a liar, and then getting questions about there being possible recording devices in the Oval Office. Just give us a little bit of insight into that.
Well, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, the deputy press secretary who briefed off camera yesterday, but we do have recordings of what she said. She almost said it jokingly, oh, I'll look under the couch cushions in the Oval Office to see if there are recording devices, almost making this sound like an absurd question. But of course, the reason it was asked is because the president of the United States in a statement said he might have tapes of conversations. So it is clearly going to be relevant, if they exist, to any potential future legal action here. And so it is always difficult for the president's communications team to reconcile sometimes part of the legal strategy, the communication strategy, with what the president is putting on social media. But remember, he is the president of the United States. These are presidential statements, and so they do become relevant to this potential complaint as well, because you can imagine lawyers for someone like James Comey saying, well, the president also spoke about these conversations, so why is it a problem for one and not a problem for the other? So it takes us down sort of another rabbit hole there, Vlad, but it is surreal to have the spokesperson for the president of the United States, the face of America to the world, standing at that briefing room podium with the seal and the American flag behind, saying the president is not a liar. And so it just shows you how really entrenched and bitter some of this has become, when it is really about some pretty serious allegations here in terms of the behavior of both the former FBI director and the president himself.
And Margaret, before I let you go, the president, as you know, will address the media this afternoon after meeting with Romania's president. A lot of people on social media ask me, how is it decided which news outlets the president calls on? People are wondering which news outlets he will call on today, just the day after James Comey testified on the Hill. Explain to our viewers how that works and what you're hearing.
Well, we don't know yet who the president will allow to ask questions. We saw at his last press availability, and this isn't a press conference, really. This is just typically, and the protocol is to have two questions from the White House press and 2 questions from the press that travels in with the foreign leader, in this case, the president of Romania. But the last time we did this, we saw the president himself doing the picking as to who and which reporter he would call on. Typically, they have somebody as an intermediary, a press secretary or others, who is saying, well, you know, let's go on a rotation here. That was certainly the case in the Obama administration, where they tried not to let one outlet too often get the same question or get the first question. And we just don't know. We don't know who will be getting the chance to ask a question at 2:45, but certainly the questions that so many want to ask is for any kind of response to James Comey's testimony, because the president was remarkably restrained in his own comments during the course of that live testimony that was covered in wall-to-wall cable news coverage and even on our own network, which is a highly unusual thing. But we'll see what happens. Today, the president was back on Twitter and continues to say he feels vindicated.
Yeah, it's always interesting, Margaret. Sometimes the president calls on, let's say that they are friendlier news outlets than others, but it's always interesting to hear.
Not unusual for a president to do.
No, not at all, not at all. But it is interesting that sometimes the difficult questions, when that does happen, comes from the visiting country's reporters, which I recall in that press conference that he did with German reporters when Angela Merkel was here. He got some very tough questions there from the German press.
Well, it always makes us feel good as journalists to see when you can see some dogged questioning there. But I think it also is so interesting, Vlad, to see the way the rest of the world is watching and thinking about us. And so sometimes those questions being asked by those foreign journalists are very revealing.
Absolutely. Margaret Brennan from the White House for us. Thank you, Margaret.